This conference will now be recorded.
My glasses. Our July meeting? Kelly, could you call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Bessler?
Here.
Commissioner Cassidy?
Here.
Commissioner Cleo?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cox?
Here.
And Mayor Pugh.
Here. All right, can we stand for pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, have the agenda before you. Are there any additions, deletions, modifications?
Mr. Mayor, we're going to talk about the police chief under the presentations and proclamations, just to remind you,
Yes, you want to put that in there?
just so you don't forget.
Okay, appreciate it. All right, anything else? All right, hearing nothing, anybody make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the agenda as is, including the police chief presentation.
And I'll second it.
Motion second, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, presentation proclamations. B, FCCMA/PBCCMA presentation honoring Ocean Ridge's 35 years as a council manager form of government. Could you explain to us what the FCCMA?
Certainly,
We're
Mr.
missing
Mayor.
ICMA also.
FCCMA is the Florida City County Managers Association, and PBCCMA is the Palm Beach County City Managers
Oh, wow.
Association.
It's a mouthful.
Thank you for coming.
ICMA, International City Managers Association, which we're on behalf of tonight. But good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commission members. My name is Lori Laveria, and I'm currently serving as the Deputy City Manager of Palm Beach Gardens. And I also serve on the Board of Directors of FCCMA, the State City Management Association, as the immediate past president. And with me tonight, we have Dale Sugarman, who's retired, and I'm very jealous, retired many long tenured years of public service as a city manager, and Brian Moray, who's the City of Atlanta City Manager. So on behalf of the Board of Directors and our nearly 700 members of FCCMA, we are honored to be able to present a special certificate of recognition to you tonight. So congratulations on the 35th anniversary of your town's recognition of its operation under a council manager form of government. That is through the International City Management Association. So that's different, and understanding the town was founded in 1931, that it may have operated under your council manager form of government. It was 35 years ago that your town actually applied for this recognition, technically as that form, to the International City Management Association. And we think it's very important to reach out and celebrate these milestones with our cities and counties throughout the state of Florida. I just lost my spot. So the council manager or in your case, the commission manager form of government, it was created to separate administration from direct political influence, and to be able to establish, merit-based practices within local government. It's modeled after a corporation's framework, with voters selecting a council or commission, who in turn appoints your manager to implement your policies and your actions and get your vision and your mission accomplished for you. Nearly 75, I'd say almost 80% of cities and counties in the state of Florida operate under the council manager form of government. So we just want to thank you for recognizing the importance of professional city management, and your excellent town manager, I'm with the Gardens about a year now. You're almost here 10 months now, Lynn, and you've got a good manager here that I'm sure will see you through your vision and your mission and getting your policies and your desires accomplished in this wonderful little town. I used to work in Boynton. I was your next door neighbor for about 15 years, and Dale lives in Boynton. So we have watched just what a beautiful town you are, and I see Ken's back as you're back on the commission. It's been a while, and I haven't met many of the rest of you, so it's a pleasure tonight. So we thank you, and we have a nice certificate for you, and we would love to ask you to come down and take a photograph with us so we can send it to our state association and our international association. If you're willing to take a minute and take a quick photo. I know you just love it, Mayor, don't you?
Come on, all of us.
All of us?
All of us.
All of you, yeah. And now the procession. How about just one? We're not gonna let you off the hook that easy. I know, and she's hurting.
Yeah, they've been here since 2:00 for a budget meeting.
Now, we'll have the mayor, obviously, the whole group, whoever would like to be.
Come on.
Mayor, and you come.
They're usually much more better dressed, but I've had them here since 2:00.
It's summertime, it's summertime.
No.
Yeah,
we'll know
that, casual. We're gonna be on the end.
Which way?
Yeah, you can put it right in front of my face, I'm fine with that.
Oh.
I was taking a picture of it.
Usually we have
Kelly,
the clerk.
wanna?
Can I give you my phone?
What town are we measuring? Every town.
Hey, you were Briny for a bit.
Briny.
That's like.
Delray is assistant,
All right.
Boynton is assistant and manager. Island Beach. Couldn't hold down the job.
Did you do water too? You did utilities for a while.
So you can see the sign.
Thank you for indulging us. Thank you. Got it?
Did you get it?
All right.
There's no
Thank you,
flag?
Mayor.
Thank you.
No, we don't need
We have a nice bright room.
We hope to be back in 5 more years. We do it about every 5 years. Yeah, but I want you to get with.
What do we need?
Thank you again.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, we're gonna do the recognition of Officer Alex Sazon, Distinguished Service Award for Enforcement Traffic Safety Committee of the Palm Beaches. Chief, or is it chief or is it?
I'll take it. This year, Officer Sassoff was submitted by the police department, by Chief McClure, for his extraordinary work doing traffic stops to keep the community safe. That's helped with our LPR system, helps him facilitate that. He had over 500 traffic stops in 1 year, which one of the reasons why that is significant is he works night shift, so he's not seeing all the heavy, busy day traffic. So that's a lot of speeders that come over the bridges and race through town, thinking it's a small, sleepy town. It's people with outstanding issues on their driver's license that he's alerted to via the LPR, things like that. So he was submitted and awarded the Distinguished Service Award for Enforcement on Traffic Safety. He had the opportunity to attend a luncheon in the honor of all the other individuals that received the Traffic Safety Awards. This comes from the Traffic Safety Committee of the Palm Beaches. And so we just wanted to take a few moments to recognize Alex and his hard work for the community.
All right, is Alex here? No? All right, well, thank you, Alex.
Revenue source.
Yeah. All right, lastly, on our proclamations, I would like to publicly recognize our new Chief of Police, Scott McClure. I'm going to take.
I look forward to serving the residents, working with the commission, and a lot of good work to be done. I'm happy.
All right, thank you, Scott. I hope you're here for a long time. All right, announcements. Okay, we got the meeting scheduled for the next month as follows. Regular time commission meeting on Monday, August 7th at 6. We got a budget workshop, special time commission meeting on Monday, August 7th. What time is that one on, 2 p.m.?
2.
2 p.m.
Can we move that so we can like make it?
Whatever time you all would like to move it to. We could even have it on a different day.
Well, no, I'm saying that maybe we could go ahead and like, because it's going to be shorter, I imagine.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so we could actually make it a little later.
If that's what
How
you
about
need.
4?
I was thinking 4 o'clock,
Okay,
With the commission starting right after.
immediately following.
all right.
All right, let's see. Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on Tuesday, July 18th at 9 o'clock. All meetings are held in the commission chambers in Town Hall. The town is hosting a blood drive One Blood on Friday, July 21st from 9:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Saturday, July 22nd from 10:30 a.m. to 4.
That has changed.
I was gonna say.
What happened?
That has changed. Has changed.
That's changed.
Yes, it's only on Saturday now. They took away the Friday date.
All right, so the One Blood van will be here, or bus should be here on Saturday only. Okay? The bus will be parked behind the town hall. All those wishing to donate blood can sign up through the link posted on the town's website.
You think, since it's only on Saturday now, we should move the van to the front of town hall? So
Yeah,
more
put in
people
the
see it?
parking, right in front of the parking lot.
They usually do.
That's
Oh,
where
they
it
do?
is.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they-
I mean, all right, so we know where it's gonna be parked and we know what day it's gonna
Say
be.
you guys go.
They're used to it being on Friday, Ken, where it parks in the back.
All right. Residents who wish to sign up to receive important town notifications and news through Civic Ready should sign up on the town's website or call town hall for assistance and speak directly to Kelly. All right, so we got public comment on any matter other than if you want to speak on something that's in the agenda.
Sorry, you already had your 3 minutes.
I beg your pardon?
Are
Are you gonna limit, you gonna cut my time down? I had to go and eat a piece of pizza. and come back.
Good nourishment.
The thing I wanted to bring to your attention, as you know, I'm a member of the Garden Club, the longest serving male member of the Garden Club. And my wife and I, of course, have a different concept of a garden, and we've gotten orders from the Garden Club. But we got some phone calls from people who are very upset about a tree removal at the property on North Ocean Boulevard. It's Eleanor's property. I don't have any issue with him. I happen to like him and his wife too. So that's not the issue. The issue is that it was removed. Apparently, Kelly hasn't been able to get back to me on the records. In violation of your own ordinance. You have a tree removal ordinance that's been on the books since 2018. You're supposed to get permission to remove a tree, certainly of that substance. Now, supposedly it was a banyan, an Asian fig, which are not native, but considered historic. I even asked for the list of the historic trees, but she hasn't been able to find that either yet. And you paid $5,000 for that list. So, even if it was agreed to be removed because of some reason, it was not in the right of way. It didn't encroach into the right of way, and it's not on the sidewalk side of the right of way anyway. So my point is that there was no communication apparently between the building department, mayor, you weren't informed, were you? It disappeared like in 1 minute, the tree. So I'm just trying to point out, if you want to keep oxygen machines alive in this town, which take CO2 from the air and pump it into the ground and emit oxygen for all of us and the shade, you need to pay a little more attention. There's more trees on that strip. The guy who built the Pyramid House, which you're going to have on the agenda tonight, had a tree there he built a wall around it and left the tree. So everybody complains about him, but he did do that. So I'm trying to bring this to your attention so that you will think about it in your planning and zoning and your building department issues. Okay?
Already?
Wait, that wasn't too hard, was it? No. And I got 30 seconds left to talk about Form 6. Someone brought it up today. Ken Cavill made a comment about it. This is about control. This guy, the governor of our great state, is so right and he's so eager to show the rest of the country that he can stomp Disney down and he can take control of corruption at every level of government. We all know there's corruption at every level of government in Florida. I've been here all my life. I know that exists. So that's what the Form 6 is all about. It's control. He wants to be able to tell you what you can do.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody else for public comment?
I know.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Denise LeBlanc, 12 Ocean Avenue. And I came before this body at the last meeting with concerns regarding the flooding on Ocean Avenue and the alleyway in between Ocean Avenue and Coconut Lane. And I just wonder if I could get an update on the mitigation plan. And secondly, I had mentioned at that time that I thought I was the only one doing maintenance on the drain in the alley because I used to pull the weeds out. And I observed the other day that apparently some herbicide had been poured right around the rim of the drain. And I suspect that it's Roundup, which is uses glyphosate, which is pretty dangerous with known links to metabolic and liver disease. And I just wonder if someone could confirm which herbicide is being used there, and is that what constitutes the mitigation plan? And I would.
Do you have any idea?
I do not know what it was used specifically without speaking to our public works department and seeing if they were the ones that did it. So I will get back to you on that. As for the mitigation, it was a topic of discussion during our budget workshop this afternoon about having that on the capital plan and what some options are.
And how we're gonna look at it, see what we can do to fix or try to fix what's there. Because your property is a little lower than that grade.
Yes.
So, you have to almost lower the grade to your level, but then again, what happens when that may not be able to hold that much water in that catch basin. So
Right,
it's a
even
whole plan has to be done to see how we can mitigate that flooding back there.
Yeah, even now, I looked in the drain just before the meeting and there's about 20 inches of clearance there. And there's also, by the power line, somebody had dug a hole. And so all of that water goes right into my yard. It looked like somebody from the utilities had dug a hole there and there's a left up coil of wire. It's been there for more than a year. I don't know who's responsible.
Could you check that out too, please?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, any other public comment? Betty, I didn't even see you come in.
How was Italy?
Anyhow, I just want to comment that part of the problem is there are people on Ocean Avenue that have dug a trench and are draining directly into the street at the lower level. And maybe you ought to block the water back into their own yard.
Thank you, Betty. All right, any other public comment? All right, hearing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. We'll go on to the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to, consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right, moving on to the regular agenda items. The first one is designation of voting delegate to represent Ocean Ridge at the annual Florida League of Cities Conference.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, this may sound very similar to what we did a couple of months ago, but that was for meetings at the Palm Beach County League of Cities. The annual Florida League of Cities Conference is in August in Orlando. And as a community, we have the right to have a voting delegate to vote on any decisions that the overall statewide league votes on. Commissioner Cassidy will be attending that conference, and so will I. So my recommendation is that she would be named the voting delegate, and if for any reason an alternate than myself.
Okay, move to nominate Carol to be the delegate and you as the alternate.
Well, we got to do public comment first. Any public comment?
Say voting delegate.
Okay.
Voting delegate.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for serving. All right, consider authorizing an amendment to the 6273 North Ocean Boulevard Construction Extension Agreement. Christie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you recall, we were last here in June. We were talking about 6273 North Ocean. An agreement was entered into June of 22 to give them until July of this year to complete construction on the house, the property. At the last meeting, their attorney, Stanley Price, was before you with their contractor, and they were requesting an extension two issues, the utilities for both the water and for FPL, the electric utilities. They were seeking an extension to February 15th of 2024 due to delays by having to go under North Ocean for both utility connections. We also had an issue with the front facade that has been resolved in part, but they need to finalize it. They've submitted revised plans to put the windows and the openings in the front facade consistent with the code requirements, but they need a little bit more time to complete that project. So in the agenda is a draft agreement which would extend the duration of construction through to February 15th of 2024 for utility connections. The front facade construction would be continued until November 1st of 2023. Now, based on some of the commissioner comments from last meeting, I included a liquidated damages provision in there. In talking with the town manager today, one of the issues that was brought up is that since this property will not receive a certificate of occupancy until after this calendar year, for purposes of real estate taxes, it will not be included on the real estate rolls for another year as a completed project. So one of the discussion points and for this commission's consideration is perhaps with liquidated damages or in lieu of liquidated damages is essentially a pilot agreement, which is a payment in lieu of taxes that would cover the difference of what they would have owed had the project been completed as of December 31st, depending, of course, on whether they claim homestead or not, and have that payment made, assuming they hit the durations that we're extending to, and then if not meeting those durations, they would also pay liquidated damages.
Okay.
So the draft amendment that is in the agenda, the change to it would be a payment in lieu of taxes.
And where would that be? What section is that be under?
We would need to negotiate it with the
Okay.
property owner since that issue just came up today.
So yeah, property owners.
Right, so what I would ask for, this was something, and I know that the attorneys are present, Mr. Richmond and Mr. Shear are here for the property owners, to talk with them further and perhaps come back at the next meeting in August with a revised amendment.
Okay. Anybody, any public comment? All right. What about the commission?
I'd like one more request too, that third whereas, where they're saying they're force majeure. I don't think we ever decided that that's true, and it doesn't seem like it is to me, because it took them 8 years to build. When they thought they were building, I don't know what they thought they were building, but they were only asking for 400, amps or volts, and now it's 800, and Florida FP&L won't give it to them now, it has to go from the east. So I don't think that has anything to, I think it's just mismanagement of the project, and it taken 8 years. So I don't think that qualifies.
I agree with that, and just to the tax point, this project was supposed to have been done in 2017 if it was going to be 2 years, and if you look at the taxes that they're paying on the property, they're actually delinquent in taxes by a significant amount right now. But they're paying taxes on the land value, and that's, what we've foregone, I did a quick calculation, is almost $1 million in tax revenue.
Per year.
No, it's total, because.
I came out with 935 just for 2022.
Well, that's their total tax liability. The Ocean Ridge portion of that is about 28.5%.
I figured the house was worth 25 million. I did it from there. But whatever, a lot of money.
A lot of money.
So I guess, Christie, you're going to be doing some more negotiation?
If that's the consensus of the commission, I'll do some negotiation.
I did go through the drawings, by the way, and the notes on the history in the file. As far back as January of 2019, there's a memo from a site visit signed by Manny in there saying that they had to comply with the windows. The windows had to go back in. So it's not like that's a new discussion. They knew that back then. And also the most recent mechanical drawings and electrical drawings show a total load of 555 amps. So when it went from 555 to 800, not clear.
I had a couple of questions. In this proposed, what do you call it here? With the penalty, are you choosing November 1st and February 15th? In other words, if you don't finish this by November 1st, it kicks in on that. And then if you don't finish the entire project, it kicks in, but you finish the front by November 15th. It doesn't kick in till, okay,
Correct.
that's question number one. Question number two, I actually saw the property. It's, I think when they finally finish it out, you guys should have an open house for the town residents. You can understand why this took so long to build. You know, it's something, obviously the gentleman's got a lot of money. He has a certain vision. He's accomplishing that vision, which is causing us all these issues and the neighborhood all the issues. So I think there should be some kind of penalty for that. But
And that is people visiting the house?
no, I just went as part of the tour. Ron, I think, Ron was kind enough to show me the whole place, and it's pretty stunning. So, the third thing is maybe Christie wants to take it from here. We haven't let them speak. Maybe they would agree to what you've already written.
Absolutely. We haven't written, I just talked in concept today with their other attorney, Stanley Price, on the taxes issue, and we just discussed that in concept. So it's not actually in the written amendment in the agenda package.
Yeah, then she's gonna have to talk about the other couple of items that came up here.
Right, but there's also the liquidated part, which you could take that, and that maybe they have an idea of what.
Well, I don't want to negotiate something with town meeting.
Okay.
I do have one comment to add. If you could add, Christie, a best efforts clause, that they have to use their best efforts to pursue the permits and to get the work done, so that it's not being delayed and so we don't run afoul of this later.
All right, so that's all the information you need? So is that it for the commission?
The commission does need a motion to extend the current agreement until the August meeting.
But that motion has nothing to do with this.
No, it would just be extending the current agreement that's in place until the August 7th meeting,
Not the amendment.
not the amendment,
Okay.
the current one that's in place.
Do you wish to say something?
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm Gerald Richmond of Fisher Potter Otis, and I, along with Ed Shearer, represent Andrew Rifkin. We want to do everything we can to try to cooperate and get this done. I don't think there's anybody more than Andrew Rifkin who wants to get this project complete as quickly as he can after frankly, how long an effort this has been. What I'm concerned about is with regard to the two issues that he cannot control. He can't control what's going to happen with regard to FP&L and with regard to the water lines through here. I brought with me the construction manager to go ahead and speak very briefly to you so he can address the issue of what it is that really is left to be done. As far as the liquidated damages, whatever, we are going to do everything we can to get it done as soon as we can. The only problem is, and this is the force majeure, it's got to be in there because supposing there's a hurricane in November, supposing there's a hurricane in August, there's nothing that we can do with regard to that if that delays FP&L and if there's some delay in FP&L and getting the water in during that time. But I can tell you this, Mr. Rifkin would like to be in there tomorrow, if he could be. And we're going to do everything we can to move heaven and earth to basically get this done. With that, I would like to ask Ron, if we may, to briefly address you with regard to answering some
Well, you
questions.
can give us an update on what the permit situation is.
Sure.
One thing I would like to clear up is the electrical.
The name and address for the record.
Ron Bolstra, 5522 Baja Terrace, Green Acres.
Thank you.
The electrical issue, the house always had 800 amps. The 400 amps is all they can bring us from the south, that street, Edith, I believe it is. The original contractors that were there back in 2018 asked all the questions like I mentioned last time. They said they had 800 amps from that location. They do not. What they could provide the home was 400 amps, which doesn't do us any good. Like Casey said, the house full draw at full rate is just under 600 amps. Every home has a rate in it, and your service is upgraded a certain percentage above that rate. So the home has 600 amps as full power, but in permitting, that would be increased to 800 amps. There's a percentage they add to that 600, so your house can never overload the circuit. The home always had 800 amps. It's just FPL from that side of the street can help provide it anymore. As far as the permitting, I do know the locates have been out this week and last week from FPL and us as far as DOT, as far as the electrical and water. So they are working on it as far as the DOT permits. And that's the biggest delay for both of us is the DOT, with the state being a state highway.
And the other thing you wanted to address briefly is what remains to be done, the driveway,
The driveways were pouring this week. The pools, as you saw, are basically done. We can't run filter systems. We got some temporary filters running. The upstairs, because we couldn't put the house under air, that we changed the tile. That's being done this week.
tile instead of wood.
Yeah, we talked about that last time, and the cabinets are in, the countertops are coming, and we just have some glass ordered for the stairs going to the roof. The roof deck on the roof is done, the glass is in. Just really some minor plumbing and electrical after that. And hopefully, if nothing happens, we can get some power this year, we can get out of there. And once we get power, I would guess it'd take me probably a month and a half to get through inspections.
Do you need power to fix the front facade?
No, we actually started the west out. We got the revisions back yesterday. Today we drilled holes so we can get the windows in as per plan. So our plan is to cut them loose this week.
All right. What do you mean by cut loose?
The windows, we're gonna cut through the concrete this week. So you'll see the openings on the north and south and the garages.
Yeah.
And as far as the windows, we're gonna cut them and probably put some temporary plastic over them so we can order the windows. But we've already started. We ripped all the drywall. Most of the work we're gonna do is from the home side, not from the street
The
side.
reason I'm bringing this up is because the water and the power should not affect the November 1 deadline. That's what we're getting at.
The water is causing me issues with landscaping, obviously. I can only put so much in at a time because I gotta get it watered. Power is causing us.
But I think once the facade up front was taken care of, I think there would be a lot of people in town more relaxed.
We're gonna cut through with concrete chainsaws. So that could happen this week. So all the openings would be open. The worst part of the job will be done. No, that cutting's gonna be loud.
There'll be complaints about that.
Yes. And they don't run on a generator. They run their gas driven by pneumatic compressors. But it's gonna be loud.
All right. Any other questions?
So are you saying that you might not be done with the front by November 1st?
No, we'll be done with the front.
Unless a hurricane comes.
I have a question, a couple of questions. I'm sorry, I forget your name.
Gerald Richmond.
Gerald, your comment about if a hurricane happens.
Right.
I think that would constitute force majeure if we've already entered into an agreement, right?
Correct.
So that's different. Thank you for showing me around, Ron, the house. The November 1 date, Christy, you just put in there that the front facade shall be taken care of, but can we impose anything just to accelerate the whole thing getting done? Some kind of a substantial completion clause? If just the windows are cut through by November 1 and then now we're gonna have more delays.
Well, the November 1 date was based on the proposed date that the contractor provided to Stanley Price of ordering the windows, getting the windows in and installing. So the front facade, based on those initial dates provided, should be done by that date. I didn't just make up the date, so that's just for the front facade.
There's still a lot of work to be done inside though.
Well, some of it, I don't know that it's 100% necessary for them to get their CO.
A lot what we're doing right now isn't.
Right, so yeah, there's still work to be done so that they can move in.
As far as a CO goes, the kitchen cabinets, those would have to be hooked up. But other than that, the flooring, like I said last time, we swapped out from bamboo because I can't get the house under air. So that we are proceeding with. But as far as CO, it would be the kitchen cabinets are the only thing that has to be. Because we put you saw, we put temporary vanities in all the locations.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions?
So,
All right, thank you.
in short, we're doing everything we can to get it done as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so anyone make a motion?
Make a motion to extend till when, Christie?
Next
The
one.
August meeting, August 7th.
To the August meeting, at which point we're going to have a amendment that we're gonna vote on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and second, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. All right, moving on to the number 7, approval on first reading of ordinance 2023-03, an ordinance of the town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending its code ordinances, chapter 70, signs, article 1, in general, by creating a new section 70-9 entitled beach signs to establish reasonable time, place, and manner regulations for signs on beach property, providing for scope, intent, purpose, findings, severability, repeal of the conflicting ordinances for other purposes, and an effective date. Christie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, again, for first reading, as you may recall, at the June Town Commission meeting. 4 changes were requested. The first was to move the sign height to 6 feet from grade. It was also to limit all signs to 18 by 18 inches. It was also to make the face of the sign either facing east or west, and to change the amortization schedule to 30 days instead of 90 days. Those changes have been made and are in the version that's in front of you for first reading.
All right, any public comment?
I just want,
Name and address for the record.
Terry Brown, Harvard Drive South, a clarification on the private decks, which are wood, leading from the dunes down. If they have signs attached to the deck itself, does this ordinance affect those removal? Where it says private property, no trespassing on the deck itself, on the steps going up. There's a couple of places where there are pretty outrageously ugly signs, but I didn't know if that would be affected in any way. Would you require they be removed?
Mr. Mayor, is that on the, if it's on the toe of the dune?
Coming from the ocean, walking back up, which I recently did with the assistance of my daughter and my wife, there's some places that have a sign attached to the wooden deck.
Yeah, but they have to be facing east and west, so they would have to be removed.
To answer your question.
Well, I think what he's saying is, if you've got somebody who's got a stair, stairs down to the beach, at the bottom of that, attached to the stairwell, they have like a sign that says private property.
The little rope, perhaps.
You know, private property or no trespassing, things like that. They're not freestanding signs other than the structures that are through the dunes.
And the new ordinance is,
Some of them are attached right to the deck itself, but I'm not trying to cause a problem. I just wondered if they stay or go.
but Christie, well, actually, you were here. There's an ordinance that was passed about steps down, and you had to step onto the sand so that the last step was into the toe of the dune, so to speak. However, after storms, there are more steps than that exposed, so it's beyond the toe of the dune because the toe of the dune keeps changing. So I would think that if people have a sign at the bottom of their stairs with a little rope through it, it would be fine. I hope everyone else would interpret it the same. Right?
But if it's a private.
Right, private.
If it's a little sign, it's not, Wait, so Christie.
Anyway, when you get into enforcement, you can look at them.
Thanks a lot, Terry.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think we'd have to look at them on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
See, based on the criteria that we drafted up, if they meet that criteria. It sounds like if they're like at the toe of the dune, even though just attached to the deck, they may meet the criteria, but we're pretty specific on some things, so we'll have to look at them.
Okay. But that's not gonna change whether we can vote on this or not.
Yes, sir.
Any other public comment? All right, back to the commission. Any comments from the commission?
Yep.
Go ahead.
So, one thing that troubles me, like, let's say you go to the beach, if somebody has a sign that emulates, the size of the town signs, and they have it in the wrong location, they have it to Eastwood, and we're basically telling them to move it back against the dune, which is what our intention is here. They can't necessarily use that sign if it exceeds 18 by 18, number one, and number two, they need a permit to do what we're asking them to do. So I wouldn't think a permit would be required to remove your sign from where it's not supposed to be and put it where it is supposed to be.
Well, I believe right now we require a permit for all signs, so we know where they're supposed to be located. And this, I believe the signs that created this discussion, they were permitted.
Well, did you actually find paperwork on that?
Yes, and
Because
they
I was
were,
told they were not by Tracy.
they were permitted.
By
There's
Tracy.
actually a little map that shows
Yeah,
where
there
they,
definitely has a
and
permit.
so that's what we
Yeah,
standard,
she
it's
told me
not like
what
a
it was.
full-blown site plan that we require in order to permit the signs. I think it's a hand sketch that shows, here's the general location. But it's typical to require a permitting process for all
I
signs.
don't, in some of these cases, I don't see why a permit would be required. That's my first point. My second point is, and maybe it's in here and I missed it, it doesn't say what materials the sign can be made from. It's great on what the post can be made from, but not what the sign can be made from. So I would think we'd want to
Well,
put.
it says right
No,
number 5.
signs
Number
and
five, signs
and
the
associated
structure.
supporting.
No, that's the pole.
No, it's
No,
a
but it's
sign,
signs, comma, signs, comma.
I missed it. Okay, my bad.
But I
Well, wait a
agree.
minute. Currently, we're using aluminum, vinyl clad aluminum.
Right, and we're telling you that shall be wood or PVC.
Right. Is that vinyl clad aluminum? No.
No, so we're saying it needs to be wood or PVC, not aluminum.
Wouldn't you rather have vinyl clad aluminum than PVC?
I'd rather just, that could be a case by case basis too when they pull the permit. I mean, do you want to add that language? We can add that language to it?
If anybody's dealt with sign companies, yes, they will bring that to your attention.
So is that agreeable to everybody? Or there'll be vinyl covered aluminum. They can be also vinyl covered aluminum. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. And I guess no one's supporting me on a permit thing.
No, because I think that at this point, then we'll know where every single sign is on the beach
All right.
and have a map.
Otherwise, we'll be back here again.
Excuse me?
Otherwise, we might be back here.
All right, any other discussion? All right, so want to make a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the ordinance with the language that Steve suggested, or vinyl covered aluminum.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Number 8, approval and first reading of ordinance number 2023-04, an ordinance of the town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending its code of ordinances at chapter 67, article 2, entitled Coastal Construction, to clarify and revise the town's coastal construction regulations for all development and construction seaward of the 1997 Coastal Construction Control Line, also known as the CCCL, seaward of the 1979 Coastal Construction Setback Line, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date. All right, here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so we've been having this conversation for a while now, and I want to just make sure we're all on the same page. So what I passed out to everybody was ordinance 2020-05, which is what sort of has kicked off this conversation, along with the town's 2019 coastal construction control line map, which shows in yellow the 79 coastal construction control line, and in purple the 1997 coastal construction control line, and also so that you have the town's zoning map. So for the first ordinance that we're going to be talking about tonight, this is dealing primarily with your coastal construction control line and addressing how far seaward the town wants coastal construction. So back when ordinance 2020-05 was passed, in terms of coastal construction, what 2020-05 did was it did two things. Primarily, it identified the 97 coastal construction control line, which is the purple line that's up on the map, that's on the screen now, as the line that any construction seaward of that would require a town building permit and a state agency permit, primarily Florida Department of Environmental Protection, DEP permit. So it identified that line, and then it also identified the 1979 coastal construction control line as essentially your coastal construction setback line. So 2020-05 said the yellow line on the map is the line for as far as we will allow construction unless you get a variance. So as of 2020-05, anyone who wants to build anything, whether it's part of a home, whether it's a pool with a deck, whether it's a cheeky hut, to build seaward of the yellow line, you need a variance. That's what exists now. So one of the comments about 2020-05 that arose with proposed development on Old Ocean was that it prohibited that construction without getting a variance. And as you know, in order to get a variance, you have to show a hardship. And with new construction, technically it's difficult to show a hardship unless your lot is really an odd-shaped lot. So in looking at that, some of the discussion that came up was sort of three different positions. Instead of a variance, what if we just completely eliminated it and relied 100% on, say, DEP to determine whether or not construction can be seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line? And that's one position. The other position, which is the position before you in the draft ordinance, is to create a process that's not quite as onerous as a variance, an administrative permit process, where what has been drafted in this ordinance is an administrative process that would go through town staff to allow for town staff to look at the same submittal you would do to FDEP, because you're still gonna have to get your FDEP approval. Look at what you're submitting to FDEP, allow the public to locally comment on what's being proposed, and allow the town manager or designee, which is typically working with town staff, to determine whether or not there's any objection to the proposed coastal construction. This is all seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line. The draft in front of you would put some limitations on that construction. If you turn to section 67-18 of the proposed ordinance, what it does is it maintains the undeveloped properties that are currently south of Corinne Street, seaward of Old Ocean, east of Old Ocean. So the undeveloped lots there would remain undeveloped. We would maintain that aspect of 2020-05. It would allow for those properties that, while they're undeveloped in terms of habitable structures, allow them to obviously repair or replace any dune crossovers, or if they have an existing structure there, there are some parcels that have been fully developed with habitable structures right on the ocean, allow them to be able to replace at the same footprint if something were to happen. The permit process is laid out. There are some exemptions that are identified, and the only development that would require a variance right away is if you wanted to build a habitable structure seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line. Then you would have to get a variance. The only other time a variance would be required is if you're expanding an existing structure or the town manager or designee denied the administrative permit process. So what we're doing is proposing is to walk back ordinance 2020-05, so we don't require a variance for all construction seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line, but there's still an administrative process through the town. in addition to FDEP. But like I said, you could pull it all the way back and just rely on FDEP. Now, we took this draft ordinance to Planning and Zoning, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended just that. They recommended that 6718 as proposed be eliminated so that the only requirement to build seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line would be an FDEP permit. Obviously, you'd need a building permit from the town as well. My comments in the agenda memo on that are that I would still recommend establishing some type of rear setback line for the properties adjacent to the ocean, because if you totally eliminate 6718, it would remove the coastal construction setback line. I would also recommend that we have a specific prohibition included in this to maintain the undeveloped lots south of Corinne. Otherwise, it is absolutely just a policy decision. If you want to just have the permitting process primarily handled by FDEP in terms of coastal construction, and the remainder of it handled within the existing town code in terms of the regular zoning and building permit process. And so that is essentially what this ordinance is proposing to do, just to address the changes made with 2020-05 coastal construction and to pull some of those back and relax those standards a little bit.
I got a question. So the lots that are undeveloped now, south of Corinne, no development on those at all.
Correct.
That's just in this ordinance.
That maintains that, which is how it exists now.
Okay.
On the dune or both sides?
On basically that, how they are now. So those lots cannot be developed whatsoever.
Correct. Correct. Now, what it does allow is in that area, the property that's west of Old Ocean, a lot of those property owners have done the required unity of title. They get a 1,000 foot credit for that dune property towards their property if they were to redevelop. That gets a little bit more into the next ordinance, but it does allow for that, so that even though they couldn't develop on the east side of Old Ocean, south of Corinne, they get a credit towards development on the west side.
All right, and then those, you said that the homes that are there now can rebuild to what they have now.
Correct, they just couldn't expand.
So there is the property that is directly next to the two, or I think they're 3-story condos that are right on Tropical.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece of property, you couldn't do anything on except rebuild it to what's there now?
That's true now, and it would be true under this ordinance.
It would not be true if we followed P&Z's recommendation.
Correct.
And that's an issue, those dunes.
Yeah,
But
so they could get a variance though. They could apply for a variance to build there?
Can't meet the hardship.
Yeah, they have a difficult time meeting a hardship.
So they'd stay within the footprint.
Yeah.
Now,
can I ask you a question? The part that you failed to mention, which you do touch on in the next ordinance, is that what else 2020-05 did is it basically shrunk the usable land area by moving the property line. So when you're saying no new construction south of Corinne, there is a lot just to the north of 5929 that there's a sign out front. Have they applied for, are they coming to planning and zoning? It was only purchased a couple of years ago. It's between Corinne and Thompson.
I haven't seen the sign.
5929?
5929 is on the market now, but the lot just to the north of it,
It's plan review.
it's in plan review. So
Which lot are we talking? The one just north of Kaczynski? That's the plan review?
yeah.
The large lot?
The one that took 20 years to tear down.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the one she's talking about.
So when you say no new development south of Corinne,
But is your question the capturing of FAR that we were trying to include
Yeah,
in this? But I was gonna have the same question. Which ordinance is that in?
because that's single family, so even your next ordinance wouldn't restore their usable land area.
Well, if you eliminated 67-17G, wouldn't that solve the problem?
Yes, but the next ordinance only eliminates 6717G for estate properties.
Right, but
Only.
my recommendation was gonna get rid of that. Get rid of 67-17, because anytime you do that, you're actually taking people's land away from them, which is a Bert Harris problem.
It's already happened.
Yeah.
So
So,
we're trying to
So
straighten
are
it
you
out.
talking about 6009 North Ocean Boulevard, where it's undeveloped on both sides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and so what you're saying is then that under this provision, they are not able to develop on the west side?
that's my question. Are they able to
Well,
develop on the west side?
Right now, they would be able to, right? But if they're in for plan review, they would have the existing ordinance applied to them. But if something happens, then yes, you're correct.
But also, per G, the calculation of their FAR is greatly reduced.
Right,
Yes.
That's
so
what I think.
6717G is the big issue that happened in 2020-05 that I'm really saving for the second ordinance to get more into that issue.
It is addressed in the next ordinance, it's
Right,
just
but that
not,
doesn't
not,
solve, the next, on number 9, doesn't solve the issue with south of Corinne. And it also takes away some people's property north of the Anna Corinne Street. Because you set the FAR 4% less, you set the lot coverage 4%.
That's in the next ordinance.
Right, but what I'm saying is if you remove that, that solves the taking of the land on those properties also. That's my point.
So we should just remove G? Is that what you said?
That's what my suggestion is, yes.
Well, this ordinance, the way I divided them up, because the last time we had this conversation, it was too confusing with just one ordinance. So I tried to divide it up so that one just addressed the coastal construction issues. And then the second one is the one that addresses that 6717G language. Now, if there's not an issue with the way we're doing coastal construction now, we can leave that in place, but my understanding was part of the issue was that requiring a variance for all construction seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line was problematic.
for planning and zoning, or,
No, for anyone, because if the 79, if the yellow line is the rear setback, and anyone wants to build anything seaward of that 79 coastal construction control line, right now you have to get a variance.
Right, but what Carolyn, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carolyn, what Carolyn's point is, go to the large lot on the west side of Old Ocean. That guy wants to build. I don't know where his property line goes, but if the 79 is considered, that's all the property he owns, but in fact he owns 2,000 square feet east of the 79, he should be able to include that in his FAR calculations for building on the west side of Old Ocean. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Right,
Right, but that's, that takes us back to the last meeting where it was all in one ordinance.
Right,
So
so
if we can just focus on
what's the total?
6718. Because all we're talking right now is all you want to do is build a pool deck east of the 79 coastal construction control line, and you cannot, because you need a variance.
Okay. So we can't vote on this if it includes G though, right?
The next one modifies it,
Modifies G.
yes.
Yeah. But having been at the planning and zoning meeting, they got really hung up on the administrative variance component of 6718. I think that was the biggest sticking point. And then when they said, let's just get rid of the whole section, I don't think it's really taking into account what they were giving away with taking away that CCSL.
Right. I would agree. And so in the agenda memo, what I said is if you didn't want there to be an administrative process for coastal construction seaward of the 79 line, what I would recommend would be then to keep your coastal construction setback line to limit the development of the undeveloped dunes east of Old Ocean, south of Corinne, and then rely on DEP for any construction seaward of the 79 coastal construction control line. So you would still have a setback line, but you'd have to get a DEP permit for any construction seaward of that in order to get a building permit from the town.
But you're talking about south of Corinne now, or all the properties?
All the properties.
So-
This is for the entire coastal area.
So is the
All
footprint
properties.
rule still hold in effect?
Well, the footprint rule always applies because if right now,
With the
if,
DEP as well, right?
um,
In other words, what happens if there's a certain parcel? You can imagine which parcel. And the DEP says, oh yeah, go ahead.
right, so anyone who currently exists who built their property under prior ordinances, under our non-conforming provisions in our code, they can rebuild, whether they're involuntarily destroyed or voluntarily destroyed, up to their existing footprint.
Footprint, okay.
Yeah. So I would assume that if our zoning code allows for that, DEP would be fine with that from a zoning standpoint. They're gonna be looking at coastal protection issues.
Okay, and my last question on that, because I think you've taken care of the problem at the south end of town, is if somebody's house, and I know these maps aren't high res, but it looks like sometimes there's a chunk of house sticking through the 79. The only thing they could do is replace that specific chunk of house.
Right, they can replace the non-conforming. So.
More questions?
Landscaping.
I understand.
You don't need a variance.
What?
Landscaping, you need a
If,
variance. Or is it limited to habitable structure?
for right now, you need a variance for all construction. If,
Including landscaping.
well, if your landscaping includes hardscapes where you have to get a building permit, then I'd say yes, you have to get a variance.
What do you think?
I'm opposed to that.
Right, where?
That was the first stumbling block we had after 2020-05 was,
Whereas
but that was the
You have to
debt.
read the whole.
Yeah.
I did.
doing
So-
the crossover.
So I don't think it's necessary to have a variance to do, for them to do, if they get FDP approval to modify their dune with plantings and things like that, we don't have the support staff necessary to make that determination. And it just seems silly. At the same time, I know P and Z said eliminate the administrative thing, so I was here when, this is a bad thing, I'm talking about history. I was here when we didn't have the notice before and after. And I know the problems we had, and Betty's in the audience, Terry's there, I know them both say it, when we passed, said, well, wait a minute, we gotta bring it to us for a permit. And it made a lot of sense, and it worked well for 20 years, right? So, I saw what happened before, and these guys did as well, that doesn't work. It's good for the DEP to be involved, but we as a town need to there needs to be a permit for that. And even if it's nothing more than confirming what the state has done. Because we are on the ground, they are not. They are not here all the time. They don't go, once they issue it, they're done. They hardly ever go back. Whereas we have to live with it day in and day out. So the problem we were having is that there was an inconsistency with what the DEP was approving and what was ultimately being done. So to eliminate that inconsistency, we said, okay, wait a minute. This is a problem. We need to have a permit for that purpose. And I think that's what we established, if my memory serves me. So I still think we need a permit to do that. I just don't think we need a variance. And if it's a minor alteration with the dune in terms of landscaping, I don't think, it just seems silly. There are little things that are happening that the people want to do on the ground, and it's requiring them to go through leaps and bounds to change out what the DEP says, yeah, it's okay to trim back that 6 feet. it's okay to do something like that. I don't have a big
So
problem with
does
that.
the word habitable take care of your problem?
Well, that's the habitable structure aspect.
Right.
So,
You're talking
if we
about
limit it-
non-habitable items.
right.
Like a
So-
dune crossover,
Well, dune crossover, you still need a building permit,
permit, but not a variance.
not a variance. No, I don't think it's necessary to have a variance. If the DEP approves it, so you have a basic here that it has to be supportive of the foundation of the dune has to be supported. So they need to have a coastal engineer, there has to be things that they have to jump through in order to get that approval.
The DEP
Right.
approval.
Right, exactly. And DEP sends out a notice and the adjacent property owners get notified. The trouble is they never notified the town. That's not a requirement. And so that's where there was a hiccup. And we said, well, why don't you put that in that you have to notify the municipality from which it sits? And they said, that's not in there, we can't.
But the administrative
So that was a
permit
really-
process
That's why we did the
takes
permit.
care of that.
What we did is say, okay, fine, you gotta get a permit here
Permit or
too.
administrative?
Well, however we did it.
Administrative doesn't touch anything, right? That's the point.
No, it was a small cost. I thought we had a small cost.
In other words,
Administrative variance?
right now it would be,
Administrative variance?
Not a variance, not a variance.
right.
No, just a
An
permit.
administrative permit, the DEP clears you, you go to Lynn, Lynn talks with Hybrid, whatever, and they decide, yeah, this is fine.
If it's a cost, we can put a cost element to it, if
No,
it's something less
I
than
prefer
whatever the
no
case may be.
cost.
Whatever the case may be. So I think it's necessary to have, I disagree relatively to have, I think it's important for the town to be informed of that. I do agree or disagree with how this is written, that the neighbors all have to be notified. I don't have a problem with the adjacent property owners that have to be notified. And the reason for that is I think that is important. Because whatever's happening on that area is going to impact the immediately adjacent properties. So I think there should be a duty to inform them. The DEP is supposed to do that, but by eliminating that completely here is not good. So I think we need to redefine neighboring properties. I don't like that anyway. I don't know what that
I think
means.
we instituted 300 feet overall. for
Well, it
everything.
should, I think they want, the P and
Last
Z
year.
suggest, yeah, we did. The P and Z, a total elimination, I don't agree. I think the adjacent property owners should be notified. That's just my take on it.
Okay.
Because whatever happens there does affect the adjacent properties.
So
It
you,
might in fact, impact others, but at least the adjacent properties, that'll start the discussion.
so you don't have a problem with D where it says administrative permit. After you go through the DEP, you come back to town and get an administrative permit. Under D.
The process envisioned was a concurrent process.
Right.
So you submit to DEP and the town at the same time. If the town approves it, you still can't get a building permit until you have your DEP approval.
But I would assume any town manager would not approve anything before it came back from DEP. That'd be-
Right, you can't get a building permit until they would have, and that's consistent with Florida statute.
So you get an administrative permit to fix your deck, to build a deck, to put a gravel path, correct? After the DEP okays it.
Correct.
Right. So there is a check mark from the town.
That's correct.
Okay. So you just tell me where my brain's gone wrong here. G, we're gonna vote on G, and then we're gonna say, okay, in 9, we're gonna change G in the next ordinance. That's where I'm in trouble.
Right
Another
now, we're
thing.
focusing on 67-18.
Correct.
You're going back to 67-17.
Right, because now I understand. It takes 67-17 takes care of you, 67-18 takes care of your problem.
Because there was too much to put everything in one ordinance, which,
I agree, but if I just read G, I would say, that's not what we discussed, but now.
well, once they're both adopted, it's gonna all,
Work together.
Well, mush,
Do you want me to go over the next
Yes.
ordinance first?
yes.
So you can
Is that okay
understand
with you,
it?
Jeff?
Yeah, that's fine.
It's getting confusing.
Let's,
No, it's
You
very
understand us?
complicated.
Yeah.
let's go to the next ordinance so I can try to explain that and then come back. We're not gonna read the title for the next one, let me just explain it. So if we all turn to the proposed ordinance that's next up. which has the much longer title, I think it's 2023-05? 2023-05, okay. So, going back to our ordinance 2020-05. 2020-05 was passed, the language that we've all been talking about, 6717G. What 6717G did was it said that all the properties adjacent to the ocean, in the entire town, excluded from your calculation of lot size and usable land area is that area from the 79 coastal construction control line, the yellow line, to the mean high water line is eliminated from purposes of redevelopment. So what that means is your lot coverage and your floor area ratio are based on a much smaller lot size. So this issue was really highlighted when 6073 Old Ocean, which is on the east side of Old Ocean between Anna and Corinne Street, came in to redevelop his property. His lot size was basically shrunk in half because of this language. So, looking at that language, what I propose to do in the next ordinance, and it's at the very end of the ordinance, and there's a variety of ways to deal with this. We can totally repeal that language, subsection G, which is one option, totally repeal it. What I did in the next ordinance, at the very end of the ordinance, section 3, was to eliminate it from the RSE district.
And
Section 3 of the proposed ordinance, where it says 6717 coastal construction.
Next to last page.
Section 2.
Next to last page.
Oh, yeah, it's subsection A through F remain on
There it
screen.
is, got it, yeah.
So what I did was I eliminated that language from the RSE district. Now, if you look at your zoning map, which is this colorful little map, the pumpkin colored is your RSE district. And in the RSE district, you see most of the lots traveling from the north to the south are the larger size estate lots. When you get down to Anna and Corinne Street, the lots are the same size, but they're separated by Old Ocean. Historically, we believe that most of those lots were owned by the same folks. So the west and east were owned by the same folks. And at some point, the east or west or both were sold off, and now they're all under different ownership for the most part. So when someone comes in to develop one of those little lots that's on the east side of Old Ocean in that area, they need variances because their basic lot size or basic lot width and their lot depth do not meet the basic requirements for redevelopment in the RSE district. So to make that issue even worse is the language in 6717G that squished their lot even further, because if you look at the coastal construction control line, the 79 coastal construction control line is up within their property boundaries, and sometimes it almost makes it half the lot of what you see there. So to address that issue in the next proposed ordinance, like I said at the end, we removed it from the RSE district because that was really the district that was really hardship hitting for that issue. For the larger lots, yes, it does still take away some of their property, not all of it, but it still takes away some of their property depending on exactly how far out their property line goes. So what I did in this proposed ordinance is in the RSF district, which is your regular single family, and the RSC district, I did identify the 79 coastal construction control line as the rear setback line, just to make that clarification, and that would be based on the other ordinance we talked about earlier. But in the RSC district, what I did was I revised the maximum lot coverage and the maximum floor area. So by eliminating 6717G in the RSC district, the lots go back to their existing size for purposes of determining redevelopment, your floor area, and your lot coverage. that means you have more space to develop now, because 2020-05, that language would be gone. And based on the conversation we had last time, to try to encourage armoring in that district, which the southern lots in that district already have, the lot coverage would remain at 32% if they have armoring, but it would be reduced to 28% if they don't have armoring. Now, one of the comments I've gotten back was that FDEP doesn't always approve armoring, so one thought would be to add other language that would allow for some type of protection. And I think, and I just looked at this memo that we got right before the meeting, there may be some language we can steal from that to allow not just armoring, but some type of coastal protection that DEP would approve that would then give them that 32% of lot coverage. I did the same thing with the FAR, so that we're encouraging armoring or perhaps some other allowable protection from FDEP, keep them at 36% or if not 32%. So thinking about it this way, 2020-05, that language in subsection G shrunk the lots. Removing it in the RSE district gets them back to even, but we're trying to encourage some armoring on the coastal protection. So if they want the full lot coverage, they want the full FAR, they'll provide that extra armoring to secure the coast. And that gets them back to where they would be pre-2020-05, recognizing this is only the RSE district, and that one of the questions I got from P&Z Commission was, well, what's the impact on the rest of the town, especially to the north, dealing with the high density area? That's a longer discussion, a little bit more in depth, but
It's a topic for another day.
one thought would be, you could just eliminate that language in subsection G for the entire town. So then that would include the RSF, the RSE, your multifamily, and then your high density. Take everyone back to where it was before 2020-05. That's certainly a policy decision. I think one of the lessons I've learned going through this process is to try to make sure that we look at all of the intended and unintended consequences. And I think we've all done a fairly good job of trying to figure out, through these different public meetings, what will work, what won't work, where we get the most comments from. And so I think it's been a much more public process this time. So if the policy decision is, let's just completely remove G, I just need that direction. I think based on our discussion on the other ordinance, if we make some of the tweaks to that, you're still ensured to protect some of the areas you want to see protected, but relax the areas where you're seeing a hardship.
And just the high density, the RHM and the RMM, I looked at that in the code, and there isn't a FAR stipulation for those zoning districts, just a maximum lot coverage of 40%. So.
Well, there has to be a height restriction.
Well, there are, oh yeah,
Oh, so
height
there is
restrictions,
a
we're
FAR,
talking.
they packed it. Because you can only cover this amount of lot plus go up. I don't know.
Well, that's a maximum height thing, that's not the FAR. There is no FAR stipulation for either of those
But yes,
districts.
that would dictate FAR.
Right.
Right. So if we get rid of G in the first one, and then I have a G.
That G would be moved.
That would be moved, but we still haven't restored people, the residential estate lots towards Ocean Avenue. We haven't restored the amount of usable land they lost, have we?
No, if
Yeah, we
we
have.
move G,
Yeah.
it's done.
Yeah.
Right. So the other aspect
All
of
the way
the second ordinance, or the second half of it, is to address specifically the smaller lots
Right.
in the RSE district and to make all of those conforming. So they would all be conforming, and then it has specific redevelopment limitations on it. And depending on what you want to do with that language in subsection G, I think you could still leave that intact.
When you say subsection G,
So if you said.
you're talking the second one.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, which states clearly though, you can't use the word. right?
I'm sorry.
No, just it's restoring the rights for the RSE, which includes those homes between Anna and Corinne.
Yeah, but maybe I'm crazy, but it says here, right here, excluding from calculation of lot size, uniform land area, the area line between 79
Yep.
and the mean high water line.
And then it says the foregoing shall not apply
Shall not.
within the single-family residential estate district.
Okay,
But
but we should throw in the RSFs too, shouldn't we?
That's what Phil was mentioning before.
That's the policy decision. Do you want to just eliminate that language across the entire town? Do you just want to eliminate it in an RSF and RSE districts?
On properties abutting the ocean.
Correct.
Yes.
That's all we're talking
Yes.
about.
Right,
The only
because
thing we
even
want
if
to
you,
protect is the actual dune, which now you protected with the footprint
Correct.
rule ordinance. So if you're east,
Ken, what do you
you only
think
have state footprint.
regarding the
No, I'm thinking that
multifamily?
it gets us to where the impact on the property owner is minimal.
Right. Does
correct,
take-
and it
does
still doesn't allow any building on the dune.
Right.
South of.
Unless it already
It
exists.
serves the
Right.
purpose of what the intent was, is to preserve the dune to the extent, I'm trying to balance out those rights.
What's it do to the people that live between Corinne and Anna?
So for the people that live between Anna and Corinne, the second half of the second ordinance that we're talking about, it would make them all conforming. And then, in essence, it kind of creates an overlay for those properties on the east side. Because since they are unique in terms of their smaller size within the RSE district, it creates some specific provisions for them to allow them to redevelop.
So now they can capture the land between 79 and the mean high water mark, but they just have to meet the setbacks.
Correct.
Okay.
And one of the concerns that I heard was obviously on Old Ocean, for the pedestrian safety, to ensure that we have a determined front setback. Because right now, we've got some development right up to the right-of-way line. And so having a determined front setback that you can't build anything within, to preserve that area to be able to step off.
So I believe that you were given this by Commissioner Cassidy, like a couple of meetings ago, I don't know if you still have it. Does this now hold true? This is your chart of what was lost. And now hopefully that the square footage of each house that was lost on Corinne.
Yeah.
This
take,
This
that was several iterations
This takes care of
ago.
what we started that. Yeah, that makes that a moot point as well.
Yeah.
Takes it back to
My
the
brain's slowed.
reasonably
What?
it should be.
My brain's slowed.
It's been a
It's
long-
confused.
It's a lot to take in, and Commissioner Cassidy has been a huge help in really diving into this stuff and finding different loopholes and things like that, so I do really appreciate some of the comments she's provided. But it is a lot, and it's a lot to take in. But I think it sounds like a consensus would be to perhaps leave in an administrative permit process in the first ordinance. But the main thing would be to remove the 6717G language across the board. And then perhaps make sure that the dunes that are undeveloped are protected.
Correct. And you're gonna throw in RSF.
That we're getting rid of the whole section,
whole
so
thing.
it's moved.
So it's moved.
But doesn't throughout this it mention only RSE? You'll have to review that.
Yes, right now it's limited to remove that language from RSC. It would just be repeal that entire language for the town.
Okay, all right, so you're
the
gonna
other
rewrite.
things so I think with respect to that administrator, again, with respect to a de minimis change to the landscaping, I don't think we don't need a permit for that.
And I believe if you look at the exemptions that are in section
Yeah, I tried to,
6718E,
yeah,
the exemptions, landscape maintenance or modification that does not involve alteration of protected vegetation or removal. Now, what we currently have is mentioned under E7, modifications to the dune ecosystem. There is a permit approval process in 67-161. And that's where they come in for dune planing or dune trimming.
So that, yeah, that is so broad.
What do you think?
So every time someone wants to trim their sea grapes, they have to come in and get a permit.
They have to get a dune vegetation management plan.
Well, you get it
So
once a
if-
year.
No, they get the
But don't you have to get that from the
They get the
DEP?
DEP permit once a year, but every time they want to trim, they have to come in because our regulations limit them to trimming to 42 inches. Therefore, there has to be a checks and balances where they tell us they're going to trim, then we go out and inspect after the trim to make sure that they didn't cut lower than
So that's not a permit.
But does DEP dictate 42 inches?
DEP dictates 40 or 36 inches. The town had dictated 42 in an effort for better maintenance and protection of the dunes.
But you need the permit from the town after the DEP says go ahead and do it.
Right, the DE permit, they just had to get once, and they
Right.
submit it with their first permit application.
So it is a
trimming
permit.
application.
That was, I think, your
It's
question. Versus
an
a
application,
learning.
and they get,
it
it
is a
literally takes, depending upon when it comes in and whether or not I'm in the office, their application for doing trimming or planting maybe to a day or two, depending upon, again, the day that it comes in. It comes in, I review it, I see that they're there, I provide them with the letter that says, based on your application, you are approved to trim. These are the requirements. Remember that you can't trim lower than 42. Let us know when you're done so we can come out and do our inspection observation.
What's the cost of that permit?
$75
A year?
Yeah. So it's $75 for the entire year. They can trim it as much as they want.
All right, so for example, it's happened on a couple of property owners who came in and now that we're eliminating the variance aspect, that eliminates a lot of problems. So now it's controlled within the town as it was. Does that bring it back to where it was before?
Correct, now it's an administrative permit, so it's not gonna require a trip to the Board of Adjustment. It's just reviewing the same thing that you would submit to FTEP, allowing the adjacent neighbors to comment on it. And unless there's something that is clear in the criteria regarding denial, it can be approved administratively, and if for some reason it can't be, then you do have the option of still going to the Board of Adjustment.
So why do the adjacent, I can understand if the dune structure is going to be changed, but if the DEP authorized within the property that, yes, you can take off a section of some landscaping that's there and replace it with something else, why do we have to jump through that hoop? Other hoops? If there's no change in the dune and there's no.
That would just fall under the permit we were just talking about.
But you said, but you're gonna notify the adjacent property owners as to whether or not something's not making sense.
I don't believe it.
It was making sense to me
The
before, but
dune
now.
trimming doesn't fall under this ordinance.
I'm sorry?
Dune trimming permits don't fall.
What
under
about
this
lands, what about change in plantings? If there's a change in plantings, for example, there's some property owners on the north end that did get authority to change plantings, and we said no. Like, we have knowledge of this. I'm like, okay, one was because of the variance, they would have to seek a variance. But at the same time, why should they have to jump through all these hoops to do that?
I'm not sure when they applied for the.
Well, they couldn't do it because they needed a
No,
variance.
but I'm not sure when they applied or would have applied, but I know.
Well, let me clarify, because there's two things. If you're doing trimmings, you have to go through the administrative permit that exists.
Right.
If you're doing plantings to maintain your dunes, you have to go through the administrative permit process. This process, the administrative permit process would be anything above and beyond that, because that would fall within the exemptions. Right now, if you fall within these exemptions, you have to get a variance. So,
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
right, so if, in essence, the dune plantings and the dune trimming permits that we do now administratively are much like a building permit. You sure you got your DEP permit for the same? We look at it, we make sure everything's good to go, and we sign off, and then we inspect once you're done.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
But if we're going back to that system, I'm fine with it.
that's the way it's been as long as I've had control of it, which has been since the
Well,
beginning of the calendar year.
I think it required more than that.
The only one that I have required more of that
You may have
is,
been,
there is
you may have
one,
been
there
doing
is-
it, but it,
there's one property that has completely re-landscaped their property, if it's the property I think you're talking about. They started work removing and replanting palm trees and were caught without their tree permit to do that. When they were caught, when there was a crane involved,
On the dune?
A crane.
no, on a property. Otherwise, anything with the dunes, the only thing that has been held up in plantings is, the only thing I've held up in plantings is timing. Because if it's a native, I follow the FDP, if it's a native Florida plant, you can plant it on the dune unless it's turtle time. So I do know there was one property that applied, and the species of plants, one set of the species of plants that they were planning to plant was not a native Florida approved for planting on the dunes plant.
did the DEP approve that?
They did not, they approved planting, but not specific, they didn't spell out specific plants that they were planting on their DEP permit. They did on their permit to the town.
All right, so where are we at?
So we have to go back, take this back, take the comments, yes, work the magic, bring it back for a first reading. In the interim, what I'd like to see is make sure that as applied, how does this work?
Right.
So that Steve's question, Mike, Carolyn, everyone's questions are being asked, so there's no misunderstanding as to the process and the application of this.
Right.
Because
We started with the Kareen and a street problem. So we don't want to end up at the end of this process not dealing with that problem.
I think we're dealing with that.
I
That's,
think so.
that
I think
one's
that's-
done.
The first
That's
ordinance.
I think we're pretty
Says
good with that.
completely.
It's tweaking 18.
Mhm.
That is the
Yeah.
issue. And tweaking it to the point where it's workable, that's protecting the interests of the town without too much of an onerous burden on the property owner. And that's where, that by eliminating it completely, I think there is some merit to what's in there. I think the town does have an interest as to what's going on.
And we also
on the
agreed that this applies to RSF.
And we got rid of the whole G, so
Right.
it's
Very
everybody.
good. It's everything.
The only other question I have in the new language with the second ordinance is the reduction in the lot coverage from to 32 and 28 if they don't have armoring. And is that somewhat arbitrary to say 28%? Because the ordinance 2020-05 had no language about lot coverage. So this is new. So
So my rationale for that was 2020-05, 67 and 17G shrunk your lot. So your lot coverage and your FAR were technically affected because your lot became smaller for purposes of determining lot coverage and your FAR. So by now removing 67, 17G, your entire boundary would be included within determining your lot coverage and your FAR, so we've made the lot bigger again.
Right.
For purposes of redevelopment. It's absolutely a policy decision. I can take out the encouragement for armoring and just put the lot coverage and the FAR back to what they were. I just need the direction.
But don't you want to keep that for the Anna Street and the Corinne? street.
Well,
The
Not that
specific,
anybody
the
will take the
specific
wall.
parameters for those little lots in the RC district, I think are good because it's kind of like its own little overlay within that district. But for the rest of them, for the rest of RSF and for the rest of RSC, if your preference is to take out the language about armoring and just leave the lot coverage at, I believe, 32 and 36 for the FAR, I'm fine with doing that.
And it's still set by setbacks, the total space.
Well, sure, but
I think
I'm
take
just
out the
waiting,
lot
to
armoring.
look lot by lot to see, I mean, I did look at a couple to see, you know, well, what would that mean for their lot coverage? And it didn't seem that it would restrict them, like they still had plenty of room within what that was.
So what's the purpose of armoring? The armoring is the protection of the coastal line, if you will.
They destroyed.
Well, the
in
armoring-
dune, that they'll destroy,
Well,
put in the dune by putting in the armoring.
But the reason some people were allowed to arm and others weren't was because there was no structure that was gonna go in.
Right.
So without the armory, you could lose your sand, you
Oh,
could
yeah,
lose
no,
most of
no,
your
no,
land,
I'm okay.
but there would be no structure that would go in. So as people had pools, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
they'd lose it without the armory.
I'm trying to think of a reward mechanism that can be applied if they do enough dune construction to preserve the dunes.
Pseudo armory.
That gets them.
Well, I think that's
to the same
suggested
point.
in this memo that we got tonight.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
There's some language that they put in this memo that perhaps we can use some of that language that, instead of calling it just armoring, some
Expanded.
sense of expanded dune protection.
because some of the
I'd like to
people,
see, and you'll hear this later in my comments, I want to start us to get to the point where we're rewarding good behavior.
right,
As opposed to just trying to penalize bad behavior.
Yeah.
So back to Carol's original question, you're gonna put in language about armoring but not armor, which will then allow everyone to go to 32? That was, okay.
yeah, I think that would be preferable. Because there are people who have been refused a permit to put in armoring and have spent extensive amounts of money, you know, fortifying their dune over the years.
But they can't do anything till it falls in.
What? Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's
Yeah.
What is about to fall in. All
Christie,
right,
thank
so
you so much.
Christie, you got all the information you need, so,
Good.
That was amazing.
great.
You allow public comment?
We did already, we started, I'll tell you what, the public comment could be on,
These two are-
Only if it's constructive.
you can do public comment, but the public comment would be, just so you know, would be
Well, I
on
just wanted,
ordinance, next ordinance, which we already
what
discussed.
is the
No, it's not.
esteemed members
it's not-
of that
I know,
commission?
we didn't.
Terry Brown, Howard Drive South. You talked about the property that's down at the south end of town, next to the huge duplex that sits right on the beach,
Right,
which was set right on its old previous footprint, right? You talked about the one next to it, 51.5, which is the DeLorean property,
Dragonis.
which is a condo. It's three separate parcels. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that that property was not built at the old code. It encroaches onto that next property. The roof encroaches onto that south property. In other words, as I understood what Christie was trying to say is that if it was built at the original code that it was constructed, you could rebuild it. But that particular structure was not built that way. It was built encroaching onto the original side setback. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And the water's going right through it. The last time there was a storm, went right through it. It's not habitable. And their septic tank goes that way towards the north, the drain field. So I don't believe you can say what you said publicly, that it could be rebuilt. I don't think you could get a permit from DEP or the town. So I would be careful about that property because the guy was thinking he's gonna get rich.
Is anybody saying anything, we shouldn't be talking property specific anyway.
Correct.
no, you just mentioned
You
it.
brought it up. I didn't bring it up.
Yeah, you had that non-conforming place out at the end there, next to that piece of property.
And the other property is the property of the Adams house. There's 3 parcels on that dune. Parcel A, B, and C. C is in front of Capri, B belongs to the 152, and A belongs to that house. Mr. Adams, 1952 or whatever it
Oh, the
was.
one on the beach.
His septic tank is in parcel B. So he couldn't rebuild either. If that was blown down, you can't rebuild that structure because you don't have the space for a septic tank or a drain field. He's cheating by draining it into the next guy.
Well, I guess that would be come up if that ever
I'm
happened.
just telling you.
I mean, that house been there since I
Someone
was
said it could
10
be
years old.
rebuilt.
The house itself could be rebuilt, Mr. Brown. That does not mean that it would be approved based on its current for the drain,
Of
et
course,
cetera.
it could not be rebuilt, is what I'm saying.
They're not selling
They
it.
wouldn't have passed the health department.
That's
Yeah.
right.
All right,
A lot of
thank
homes
you.
that
Better
wouldn't
have a
pass
good
that.
realtor.
I wanted to be sure John wasn't here when I made this comment.
Don't hire them as a realtor.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item number 10.
I did have 2 comments that came in the email. You can read those.
I'm sorry?
I had 2 comments that were emailed.
Oh, you ahead.
And as well as the one that you guys received. All right, the first one is 2020-05 was passed during COVID. Property owners were not notified before and after the change in land usage. We learned about it a month ago, and most property owners still did not know, for the only notification was twice in the Palm Beach Post in August 2020, which was the legal requirement.
Could you slow down a little so we can?
Many residents were out of town. Many do not subscribe to the Palm Beach Post. The Coastal Star has a reporter at every meeting, but there is no story. Houses have been sold in this time frame and have had their value impacted. Sellers, buyers, realtor, architects did not know. There could be cause for lawsuits. Homeowners paid full taxes on downzone properties for these 2 years.
Is it not?
Florida law permits private beach ownership. It is bought, surveyed, deeded, and taxed. In 2014, Palm Beach looked at regulations not to count the beach area in determining building sites. They determined it would destroy property values and that homeowners can recover damages under the Burt Harris Act. The Ocean Ridge ordinance states that beach, dune, and ridge are in a no-build zone, 3 times what Palm Beach proposed. It could be rebuilt in the footprint, but would be a much smaller house. The eastern half of our lot is affected. With our location, it is likely to have storm damage or need rebuilding. The resale downside lot usage would create a loss of value. This ordinance affects every beachfront property in Ocean Ridge, half of Ocean Club condos, full condominiums, and homes that cannot be rebuilt. Basically, half of every lot is unusable. Any regulation has a negative effect on value. Property ownership is a large part of net worth, and this ordinance has destroyed property values for resale. A reason for this ordinance was to save the dunes. Dunes are the vegetative areas sloping from the beach to the land. Dunes are privately owned and taxed but federally protected. You cannot walk on it, let alone build on it. Ocean Ridge is named for its unique geological formation of a ridge. Most building is done on top of the ridge, not on the dune. It is claimed that this ordinance is necessary for climate change. Properties 6277 and 6275 were the site of the Boynton Beach Hotel back in the late 1800s. Our beach remains after all these years. Several guest cottages survive as homes in Ocean Ridge today. Ocean Ridge is built on mangroves. Many home sites flood with heavy rains and the intercoastal rise. There have been taxpayer projects to alleviate these problems for specific areas of our town, and their properties have not been regulated. Our entire house at 22 feet above sea level is within the restricted area. We built in 2001 with DEP permits, inspections, and approval. We are not eligible for a seawall because our house and pool are built on 40-foot pilings into bedrock. Hurricanes have destroyed dunes, and the private homeowners paid to rebuild the dune. Some built expensive seawalls. The Army Corps of Engineers, the state of Florida, Department of Environmental Protection, and the town of Ocean Ridge have never done a dune restoration project. If the private homeowners do not restore, we have done it 3 times. Francis, Jean, Sandy, and Dorian. Who will restore the dunes if private property owners don't? Please rescind ordinance 2020-05. Mary Ann David Lundquist. That was one.
Hey, kid, you start the clock before you start reading the next one. No, seriously, it's public comment.
Dear Town Commissioners, we are writing today with respect to the town's passage of Ordinance 2020-05, the ordinance. After review of online records, it appears there are very little publications on this matter, and upon information and belief, the only notices sent to property owners in 2020 were those published in the Palm Beach Post. While that may have satisfied the town's legal requirements, the lack of any other notification and little online presence is concerning, as the ordinance has huge ramifications to property owners of Ocean Ridge. As owners of 6393 North Ocean Boulevard, we never received notice from the town and only recently heard about the ordinance through word of mouth. As you are aware, the ordinance, among other terms, requires property owners along the ocean to obtain a permit from the state and town in order to develop seaward of the 1997 coastal construction line, obtain a variance to develop seaward of the 1979 coastal construction line, and excludes the area line between the 1979 coastal construction line and the mean high water line from the calculation of lot size and usable land area. Our entire main house and more than half of our land is east of the 1997 coastal construction line, and we've estimated that approximately 25% of our land lies east of the 1979 CCCL. That is an enormous hit to our usable land area and future development opportunities. All of our neighbors are in similar circumstances. When the government restricts or limits usable land of a property owner, it is essentially committing a taking. In this case, the town is effectuating a taking without just compensation. While one reason behind the ordinance was to save the dunes, the only outcome is the town's diminution of property owners' rights, not only making it harder to develop in the town, but also substantially reducing property values. Moreover, the dunes are already federally protected. Property owners have paid many times over to have the dunes rebuilt after certain hurricanes. And with our property being next to Oceanfront Park, the city of Boynton Beach preserves and rejuvenates the beach area for public use. Considering the foregoing, the additional requirements of the ordinance are overly burdensome. The necessity for the ordinance is lacking and the ramifications are detrimental. Town of Ocean Ridge property owners are being greatly harmed and current situation needs to be rectified. We respectfully ask the commissioners to rescind ordinance 2020-05. Thank you for your time. Ed and Kathy Napleton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item number 10. Request by 5 Mid Lane Road for the waiver of the penalty portion of permit fees assessed for completion of work without a permit. Lynn?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The contractor for my 5 Mid Lane Road that was responsible for the completion of work on the pool deck and pool repairs is requesting to have the work without a permit portion of their permit fees waived due to issues within their organization. The amount they are asking to be waived is $4,650, which would leave them a remaining balance of $109. Essentially what happened is the contractor's company originally submitted one permit application for replacing courtyard pavers as well as replacing the pavers around the pool deck and doing repairs to the pool itself. They were told that they needed to submit 2 permits, one for the courtyard pavers and a separate permit application for the pool pavers and the pool work. So essentially 3 permits in totality, which they submitted which they did. The permit for the courtyard pavers was approved, but due to the fact that the permit for the pool repairs work was not submitted by a pool company, it was submitted by the pavers company. They were told that their permits were not approved and that they needed to get a pool contractor to do the pool permit. All of the work was completed by the contractor, thinking that the one approved permit for the courtyard pavers was all the approvals. The contractor blames it on internal staffing issue, that they had an administrative official in their office that told them the permits were approved, did not tell them that it was only one portion of the permit, that since that time, that employee that improperly informed them has been terminated. They have submitted the permits for approval with the proper people on the permit, but because all of the work has been completed, not just the courtyard, but the work to repair the pool and the work to do the pavers around the pool, their permit per town policy is subject to a penalty of 3 times the permit fee for doing work without a permit. They are asking the commission to waive that penalty of the 3 times due to the internal organizational issues.
Thank you. Any public comment? Hearing none. So an owner of a company is gonna blame his employees and try to get money from us? Well, I
That's what's
know-
in the
I know-
email.
I know the answer to this one, but.
Is this like, this is rare, when a contractor comes to us, right?
Yeah.
It's usually the homeowner, which means that the homeowner already paid permits to the contractor?
My guess is since the project's complete, homeowners probably long since finished paying for the project. They
Homeowner may
came
not
in
even know.
for, what was it, a final inspection on something, and we said we can't do it because
You
the
don't have-
permits were never issued.
So the pool part where they weren't the experts in has never been inspected, so there could be something wrong with the pool?
There was no permit issued,
So it's the same paver company is doing the pool work, or did the pool work?
They've now included a pool contractor. And that's,
Anybody wanna make a motion?
so they've got the permit
Take a
issues and the
barbecue and
contractor
neurosurgery.
issues straightened out, but as I said, the work has all been completed. So my guess is they were calling for the final inspection. I'm
Any
gonna
further?
speculate maybe they've already been paid for everything, which is why the contractor's the one asking, because they have no method to pass the additional penalty onto the property
Do we need to talk about item 10 any further?
No, anybody will make a motion?
Motion to deny the waiver of the fees for work without a permit in the amount of 4650.00, leaving a remaining balance owed of 109.38.
Is there a second?
Wow.
Well,
No second?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I have a question. Do we know, was this done by our outside building official, the three times?
Correct. He told us to charge it.
Okay, because our code provision is 2 times plus $200. So our code requires them to pay, if the permit fee is less than 500, they pay double, less than 5,000, they pay double plus 200. So it actually should be less, it should be 2 times plus $200 for each one.
2 times 995, 2925.
It's times the amount in the
Each of
actual
them.
permit fee.
It'd be twice or 2 times the 925
Yeah.
plus 200, and then 2 times the 625 plus 200.
Correct. And I actually don't see any provision that would allow for us to waive that. It's a straightforward provision in our ordinance.
Okay, so
So I would recommend a reduction to be consistent with our ordinance, because it's 2 times plus $200.
So wait, it's 1850 plus, what's the
plus
second half?
200, so
Plus
2,050.
200.
Yeah, so the first one would be 2,000.
how do we get to 3 times?
Yeah.
That's probably the Florida Building Code that we amended locally.
Mhm. All right.
So it's 3,500. We'd be reducing it to 3,500 total.
Yes.
That's what they would be still required to pay, but you'd still be denying, you would effectively approve correcting the amounts, but deny waiving them.
Now we're paying him money.
No,
No.
he pays us.
He didn't pay it, he didn't pay anything yet.
You're paying.
No, he's paid,
That's the balance
he's,
left to us.
to date, he's paid $1,734.38.
So is it up to 2 times? Or is it 2 times?
The language is, if any person commences any work on a building or structure before obtaining the necessary permit under this article, the fee for the permit, when obtained, shall be double the total amount of the permit fee otherwise required plus $200 if the total cost of the work on it is equal to or less than $5,000.
That should be 3,300, right?
3,500.
You got 3,500?
Yes.
$200 twice for each one for each
Oh,
one.
twice, I'm sorry. I missed
So he
that.
pulls a permit, and later finds out that 3 permits were needed.
Which we told him that, and he knew that. And
At the
he-
beginning.
He knew that at the beginning. He submitted the 3 permits.
Okay,
The courtyard paver permit was approved. The permits for the pool work and the pavers around the pool were not, and he was told specifically what he needed to correct getting those two to where they would be approved. Their explanation is their administrative employee told them when the courtyard paver permit was approved, that everything was approved. So they went ahead and got all the work done, called for the final inspection, and found out they couldn't do a final inspection because the only permit that was approved was for the courtyard pavers, not for the pool repair and not for the permits or for the pavers around the pool. Now he wants us to waive the work without a fee or work without a permit fee because he says their employees screwed up, so they fired them, so they shouldn't be penalized.
You want to amend your motion? Maybe we'll get a second.
I don't know what the hell the number is. What
is the number?
What's the number?
I mean, let's face it.
What I would, yeah, or you could just amend the motion to be.
So you want me to now
deny the waiver of fees.
deny the waiver of fee for
But
work
amend
without a
the
permit,
proper,
and item number 10 for the
penalty.
amount of 3,500. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. What's that? Aye?
yes.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought he was going.
Motion carries. Thank you. We had a long night.
So you guys are doing the math while when I said the 46, when the dead silence was there?
Dead.
I was like,
yeah, they were doing the math,
All right, let's move on to the staff and committee reports. Town manager.
All right, in June, as you are aware, I promoted Acting Chief McClure to permanent chief of police. I'm very excited to continue working with him. I think that the advisory committee helped me make a very good decision, and I think it was positive to have a very public process. I think a lot of people learned about not only our police department, but what other options were out there. And so now we know as a community that we truly have the best person for the job. Frequent rains are here in the summer heat, so just want to make sure that our residents keep that in mind. We're under a heat advisory through Tuesday still. So if you can, make sure you take lots of breaks, drink lots of water, get some shade. Even if you're just outside enjoying the sunshine, you can still get heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and those are nothing to laugh at. Want to remind you all, we are doing a survey on the usage of Civic Ready for emergency and non-emergency alerts. The link is in the packet. You can also find it on the front page of our website. All you have to do is go to oceanridgeflorida.com, and there is a pop-up that says Civic Ready Survey and a link, and it will take you straight to the survey. It's 5 questions. It'll take you maybe 2 minutes to complete, just about how we're using it and whether you want to continue it. So I hope we get a lot of responses for it.
Do you know you can't get past that without actually doing it unless you want to X out of it? You can't use the website unless you X out of it.
Well,
No, I do.
But let's force some survey responses. We've got several employees celebrating their anniversaries in July. Taylor Moore in dispatch has been here a year. Billy Armstrong, Public Works, 13. Scott McClure, our new chief, is celebrating 7 years. Sergeant Ermery is celebrating 8 years, and Jean Hallahan, town treasurer, will be celebrating 18 years. I think that's a pretty substantial amount of years, and if you see Jean, make sure you congratulate her on her 18 years. Scott is also celebrating his birthday this month. Wanted to respond to the comment about the tree on the property owned by Mr. Nars. You can remove trees as part of lot clearing with land development. There is some issues related to whether or not their lot clearing permit was in effect when they did their lot clearing for the land development of that property. But, and while the tree, I don't believe was meant was on the approved site plan as something that had to be saved. Normally when there are trees that are specifically called out to be saved, they say it on the site plan, and we did review that, and it doesn't specifically say it. I understand.
You're trying to be his friend now.
No, I am following the codes. It has nothing to do with anyone's particular,
66, there's an ordinance that you have to.
But Terry,
but not associated with lot clearing. As we discussed during the budget meeting this afternoon, the building permit software, we have been talking about doing that. We have a contract that I've asked Christy to assist me in getting out of with Tyler Tech. We have a proposal with outlined steps for implementation from BS&A, which is the same company that we have signed a contract with for the financial management, so the softwares would easily talk together. I don't know the exact timeline for implementation, but the longer we wait to sign a proposal with them, the farther that pushes out. I am asking the commission tonight for your authorization to move forward with committing to BS&A. Sorry, I don't have the proposal in front of me. I left it in my budget book. Now, move forward with the BS&A contract so that we can get on their implementation schedule and get that approved and implemented as soon as possible, even during the process while we are extricating ourselves from the contract with Tyler Tech.
okay. Christie, have you looked into that contract with Tyler Tech, and have you found any way we can get out?
I've got to reach out because we seem to get a sporadic amount of comments from them, and so I'm gonna reach out to the representative and talk with them because I think part of the problem is they're a little overwhelmed right now themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will do it tomorrow.
So do we need a motion to?
We don't.
They haven't performed, right?
There's a
There's
money
no question,
number.
they have not performed.
I think the only correspondence we got is that we were on their list and they're prepared to implement us, but that's pretty much.
Well, that and a request to collect on the first year of software, what do they call it? The disbursement, basically,
Rollout.
yeah, the first year of the rollout of a blank system.
But they have not.
But they have not done it, have they?
No.
But there was a money attached to it, right? Do you-
There is.
Is it in here?
There is money attached to it. The first year of the Tyler contract, which they are trying to collect on, is $22,000. That's for the rollout that they did in November of a system without talking to anybody, just sending us an email in November and saying, okay, the system's rolled out. Now we ought to get together and walk you through it and decide how you guys want to
But
basically.
With BS&A, you're asking us to spend, I think it was a total of 35.
It was just over 40. That includes their travel expenses,
Right,
the
that's the number
hosting.
we need to approve, number one. Number two, at the same time, we're saving, was it 60 from the other companies?
We would save overall 41,000 year over year. Let me go grab it real quick.
I have mine, if that helps you.
You won't have the BSA proposal.
Yeah, you can't approve something without knowing how much you spent. Oh, absolutely. But she had that number from.
We have it in the budget meeting. I probably have it.
Yeah, but I thought we also were gonna tell her to do certain things before that, correct?
No.
We're just approving it. She doesn't have to call Highland Beach, none of that stuff.
Well, we trust that you will.
Well, that's
And we
your
have the
due
employees.
diligence.
Trusted with that.
Okay.
Good point, though.
Sorry, I dropped my keys. The total proposal from BSNA in the first year would be $40,425. That includes their modules, data conversion, data setup, custom import, project management and implementation planning, implementation and training, travel expenses for the on-site training, and hosting fees.
Okay. until we save 41 from the other, so it's kind of a wash minus, but the 22 is floating. Christie's gonna try to negotiate that away.
Right.
So you need a motion to hire BSNA at
The
the
contract
cost.
with BSNA in the amount of $40,425, and
After you contact Highland Beach and confirm
yes,
our,
that it's definitely
The
what we want to
reputation.
go with, and it's the bee's knees.
can I just say so moved at that point?
Pretty much.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, any other discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do me a favor, before you sign the dotted line, make sure the town attorney reviews it.
Yep, she
And
reviewed the last
also,
contract.
and get the comment from Tyler before we enter into something.
Yep.
Okay. Town attorney.
Very quick, thank you.
But Scott walked out on his report? All right, guys, no report from Scott. Moving on to town commissioner comments. Mr. Castor.
Yes. I won't belabor. I just wanted to mention, when I went to my first League of Cities meeting, someone asked me if I'd done my emo training. So I said, no, not yet. And then I asked Lynn, what is emo training? It's elected municipal official training, and it was very valuable, especially being new to town government. And I learned a lot, and I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to do that. And they have, EMO 2 is all about the comprehensive plan and land use, and I think I'd like to attend that at the end of October as well. And then.
Go ahead and just go right
Okay.
into your next one.
Joint workshop with planning and zoning, we've talked about this. We're going to try to set it up for September.
Yes, once everybody gets back from the super hot summer.
Okay, all right. And then I just wanted to see if we should start, I know you're talking to people about working with us on the comprehensive plan, but should we set up special meetings for that?
My understanding is it usually depends on how in-depth the changes are going to be. I did receive the proposal from the first group, which includes Corey O'Gorman, our town planner, and then another person that he works with in planning. I was wrong, it wasn't like where they just finished Loxahatchee Grove's here. So I've got that proposal.
And I had given
And then
you
you gave me a
Aaron
name
Dede's name.
that I need to contact. I want to contact both of them, get Aaron's proposal, and then look at costs, that type of thing. They both will have different ideas of what all they want. Also under the one that I have, it's basically a present to the commission, and you guys pick and choose what all sections that you want them to focus on as part of it, which could include public input meetings and things like that.
I think they should. I mean, having learned that, you know, the most important roles we have are comprehensive plan and budget as a commission.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Thank you. All right, Ken, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing is speaking of your P and Z joint, if we're gonna have a joint, let's have an agenda that makes sense. So we can talk about, as opposed to just meeting to meet. I'm really not into that. So
Well, can I make a suggestion real quick
Yeah.
for that? Why don't we send our ideas of what the outline would be for the agenda to Lynn, and just say, hey, this is what I'd like to see on that agenda from the five of us, so at least there's an idea of what that agenda is supposed to go through.
And from the subcontract.
Who?
Yeah, well, we can have hybrid,
Right.
make any suggestions on what they think.
Well, they might have come across stuff just like outsiders come across.
Well, they should be here as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But maybe they have a suggestion, here's what you need to change or discuss.
And maybe ask P and Z members what they think too.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I mean, especially just having been through this.
All ideas.
So some of this is what I'm gonna talk about right now. I'd like the planning and zoning to review the 50% rule and the standards we employ to implement that rule. Because our standards are somewhat out of line with what other communities are doing. They're a little bit stricter, and they're a trap for the unwary for somebody who buys a home here. And that is not the case in other communities. So I'd like them to review and make a recommendations. Actually, they can set the standard, right? Because they have it in their review process.
So what you're doing is the definition of 50%, that's what you're
Right,
doing.
what comes into that?
Totally agree.
Because our former building inspector went to an extreme, and that was the policy, I guess, of the commission or whoever at the time, or the planning and zoning. It was somebody made that determination, I guess.
Sometimes he made it his own.
I think he
I don't want to go.
But I'm surprised that we didn't get a number of lawsuits over that. So I think we need to look at that and see, be reasonable. FEMA is fairly reasonable, actually, and leaves it up to the municipality to make certain determinations. And we took it to the extreme for no apparent reason for a lot of that stuff. So I think we need to look at that. The other thing is to look at our review and permitting process and see what tweaks can be made to make it user-friendly and to make it more applicable in today's environment, including the cost of doing certain work that are non-related to the health, safety, and welfare, and as to whether you really need a permit to do some of these little odd jobs that are under $1,000 or under $2,500 that don't affect the health, safety, and welfare. I just think that's some of that stuff that we're requiring is not necessary. Another thing is to, if you're okay with those two, review
So,
ideas.
On the permits,
What's that?
who does that? Is that Lynn's task? Reviews this because it's ridiculous.
Well, the planning and zoning is an advisory board, right? So
Do they handle
if we
what's
direct them
permitted,
to
what's
look
not?
at that stuff.
They can do
Normally,
that.
the building official and the town manager review that. I could sit down with Mike Crisafulli.
You're talking like, I know exactly what you're talking. There's half the people in town get permits to do certain items, and another half don't get permits to do the same items because you don't need them.
Well, our permitting process is onerous, to say the least. Okay, so that is just another, I agree with you, Ken, that's the issue. We'll discuss at the workshop.
No, I think they just need to do it. I don't think we need to discuss it. I think they need to do it.
Well, we're gonna discuss at the workshop to do
over
it,
the
but the
next
thing is, there's just certain
month or
permits, I
two,
agree
and
with you,
hopefully
sir.
have things I'll work with Mike, the building official, over the next couple of months and hopefully have the revisions all either implemented or ready for approval if necessary at the joint meeting. How's that?
Excellent.
Yeah, because I think we're talking about two processes.
Right.
You have your building permit process, which the building official usually does the local amendments to the building code to address specific local issues you want to address. And then there's the planning and zoning process, which you have the development review process, which is new development or those that hit that substantial improvement threshold, which I think is what you were talking about earlier. And I think both substantial improvement is the same for planning and zoning and for the building permit issues.
But-
So we can kill both those.
So you're also talking small things, like replacing a front wall.
Right, that's the
Like,
building
why is
permit
that permit?
issues, right, right.
What is that kind of thing, right?
Certain things that don't really need it.
Correct.
Anyway, the third thing I want to talk about, or is for them to talk about, is to review, and this could be in the joint commission meeting, I guess. Review ideas to actually reward property owners that, sometimes we do codes that actually encourage the so-called mansionization that kind of traps people into building more, as opposed to rewarding those that can possibly, if you have a single-story home, that perhaps there's something that we could do with setbacks, or I'm making this up, with whatever, to reward that encouragement to build smaller, as opposed to actually some things in our code that actually encourages the very homes that they're trying to say that they don't want to have. So it doesn't make sense. So I think there's some things in our code we can look at and say, hey, listen, if you build a single-story home, then certain things can be rewarded in some fashion, whether it be FAR, whether it be whatever the case may be. I think we can play with that reduce some of these, the exposures of having nothing but big homes, one after the other. But that takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of ingenuity in doing it. And the last thing is something that would need direction relatively soon, that was brought to my attention by a property owner concerning a roof pitch. And no, I don't represent this person, but he is a property owner, and he said, you allow flat roofs now, but you don't allow anything between a 412 pitch and a flat roof. So if you want to build a standard Florida home that was commonly constructed in the 60s and 70s, that were supposedly people want to preserve that community, you can't build it here, because a 312 pitch is that. So in looking at that, I said, well, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Yeah. And then I looked at the South Florida Building Code, and it certainly allows a 312 pitch. And when you think about all that stuff, why wouldn't we allow that? Where did the 412 pitch, and that's probably my fault, it's probably done 20 years ago. I think maybe, could be. But you think about it, why? Especially in what's going on with the winds and the hurricane, why would we want to have that type of situation? So I think what I'm told is this has to go to P&Z first. Is that correct? Or can we have the modification? I always thought we could do it directly, but the town attorney says it has to go to P&Z first.
That's pretty simple.
It seems simple to me.
Right? Yeah.
But anyway, I think we need to look at that and modify that.
The code does allow a less pitch than 412, but it's technically called a flat roof, and then you need a parapet, so that would defeat the purpose of that type of roof. So we would have to revise the roofs to allow for something that's not a flat roof that requires a parapet, so something in between.
So a flat roof does not require parapets anymore. But
No, you have to have a parapet
Yes, it
with
does.
a flat roof.
No, we got rid of that.
No, we shrunk it down, but we didn't get rid of it.
So if you
I'm
go
seeing
through
flat
town
roofs
and
being
look at
built
some of
all
those
over.
old Florida homes in here, because this was pointed out to me, you couldn't build those today. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. We
Yeah,
can't.
but the thing is, it's that little bit of information about the parapet would, I believe, necessitate it going to planning and zoning, because then they can, oh, that's right. Because I agree with you, it should be from flat roof to 412, you can do anything you want.
Right.
But if we have to
You can
require,
define maybe have a minimum 212 pitch or something, but.
Get rid of the parapet.
Well, it's silly to have a parapet if you're doing a single-story home with a 312.
No,
Yeah, but see,
no,
this-
that's
that's
the
the
point.
point.
It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense at all.
We did last year.
No, it's in there.
no. All right, so,
Anything less than a 412 is a flat roof, and if you have a flat roof, you have to have a parapet. That was the trade-off to allow flat roofs, because previously you only allowed the pitched roofs. And so people were building pitched roofs with parapet to hide it, to make it look modern.
right,
And so then we said, okay, let's allow a flat roof, but you now have to have parapet with it.
I specifically remember getting rid of the ridiculous parapets at a meeting, unless I got left and there was another vote in the next meeting, because Mark Marsh even withdrew the parapets.
all right, well, let's just,
It's on.
Why don't you go ahead and
No,
just
not
check
for
that.
pitched roof. For pitched roof, you don't have to have a parapet.
No, for flat roofs.
No, for
Because it's
flat roof, you
ridiculous.
have
I
to.
can have a 3-inch pitch.
all right,
No,
it's just a disagreement, so find out
It's there somewhere.
what it is.
I'm wrong.
Give Steve a
No,
call.
either bring it back to us in the August meeting or bring it to P&Z.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense.
What else you got, Ken?
That's it?
That's it? Do you have another one?
No?
I have one thing. I would like to thank Christie for that amazing job you did on those 2 ordinances.
Yeah.
Because originally, we were gonna go to an outside person to do this, and it was gonna take months. So even though it did take you months, it was an inside person. But what you did, I thought was truly amazing, interpreting and weaving through that mess. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything else? It's like All right, thank you all for coming and meeting adjourned.
Thank you.